Hey again! It's time for today's read aloud, and I just wanted you to know that is not to fear. I got Shelby's story, and we'll keep reading it. So, parents, we are on chapter 5. Shelby's story surprised me because we read Max's story, and I got this as a gift from Cooper. During the book fair, and I wasn't aware of how serious some of the parts of the story got. So I just saw it as another Bruce Cameron story. Let's go ahead and request it. And then, Cooper and his family donated it to us. I was surprised to read in the beginning because the synopsis on the back says from rescue dog to movie star. So you think it's going to be really exciting, right? But it starts off about how her mother was chained to a post outside and they never went inside. And the person who lived inside would just come out and put a bowl of food there, and they called it like slop. And then there was another part where she's running away from a guy with a giant stick and the ground is exploding. And I'm like, okay, I think we all know what's happening there. So clearly she's a stray and people do not treat her nicely. And I can understand that because I've seen stray dogs and I've seen people treat them poorly. So we have actually talked about treating animals with kindness and going through just kind of some of the stuff that I wasn't expecting to hear in this story. So we left off. Shelby is hiding in like a junkyard. And the gentleman who owns the junkyard is the gentleman with the giant stick. He's not successful in what I just explained to you. And so he calls somebody to come and remove her. So that person's name is Megan, and she's very kind to Shelby and finds her in a little, kind of like a den of trash, honestly, and coaxes her into believing that she's a good person. So that's where we left off. Clearly Shelby's life is a rough one for an animal. Not really something we normally see. But it's life, right? So, chapter 5. Megan did come back, and she brought more food. I was excited that I leaped up from my carpet and danced with happiness. My tail wagged hard enough to make my entire spine wiggle. Sometimes Jackie Poo does that too. Megan laughed. She was happy to see me too. I gobbled up the food and then I let Megan pet me. Petting was marvelous. Megan had even brought something to help her pet me. Something she called a brush. She pulled it through my fur and it felt wonderful, scratching away itches that I didn't even know that I had. And that was not the only time Megan came back. I saw her nearly every day. She would bring food, wonderful, wonderful food, and pet me, and she'd take me outside. We'd walk past pens where other dogs lived. I saw and smelled big ones, small ones, shaggy ones, whose fur covered their eyes, sleek ones like me, tiny fluffy ones, and one long skinny one with very short legs, who yapped to tell me he was the boss every time I walked past the pen. He was not my boss. I ignored him. Other cages held animals whose scent I recognized. Cats. I used to see and smell cats when I was living in the world with Splotch. Parents, Splotch is what she calls her sister who got taken by people who take dogs to the pound. She got away. And of course I remembered the one who had come to the place with the plastic bags. There were tiny cats in some of the cages who looked at me with wide eyes and pretended they were ferocious by showing me their little teeth. They reminded me of the puppy that I used to be, and I realized they were young. They were kittens. Megan would walk with me to the yard where I would see a sky. And if that sky rained at me, I had somewhere to go where it wouldn't make me wet. That idea made me so happy. I barked at the sky to show it who was boss. That was me. And then I'd run and I'd sniff hard at the bits of grass and pack down dirt. Many other dogs used this yard too, which meant I was busy smelling all of the marks they'd left behind. Megan watched me and laughed. "Oh, Shelby," she said. Megan said that word a lot. "Shelby, come here," she'd say and show me treats in her hand. I'd run to her and she'd say, "Here's your food, Shelby." She'd tell me when she opened up the door to my pen. "Want to walk, Shelby?" She'd ask, and then she'd take me outside to the yard. I got to like that word. It seemed to mean that something nice was about to happen. Sometimes a man came along and talked to Megan. He said Shelby a lot too. "Shelby's looking so much better now that you've gotten her cleaned up," he'd say to Megan, or, "I bet Shelby won't be here long. She's a sweetheart. We'll put a picture of her up in the website and she'll get adopted in no time. You know, we've never put down an adoptable animal? Not once since you took charge of the county shelter," Megan answered, laughing at him. "I know, TJ. You know that I know." They were standing together in the yard while they talked. There were some other dogs in the yard that day too. Sometimes that happens. We'd sniff each other, and if everybody smelled friendly, there would be the same kind of games I had with my litter mates. Chase me, and it's my stick, and wrestle me with, but don't bite. Today I was surprised to see that 2 of the dogs had wheels where their back legs should be. Dogs with wheels? I thought wheels were dangerous for dogs. I sniffed these new dogs all over so that I could understand. They smelled like ordinary dogs. 1 male, 1 female, both older than me. But they also smelled of metal and rubber. I realized that their back legs were actually sitting in little carts while their front legs touched the ground. It made me think of the truck ride I'd taken with Megan. It was like these dogs could take their own truck rides whenever they wanted to. They could go pretty fast, too. I bet you guys like that fastness, right, Lucas and Jameson? We played Chase Me a bit. I know you guys like that, too. But the dogs with wheels would take breaks from the game now, and then they would go over to TJ. They'd nuzzle his hands and they'd look longingly up at his face until he crouched down to pet them. I watched with interest. Then I tried it myself. I trotted over to Megan and looked up into her face. Megan laughed and bent over to rub my ears with her fingers. Ha! It worked. I can't believe how affectionate Shelby is after she'd been astray. Pretty healthy, too, considering, Megan said to TJ. All she really needed was feeding up. "How long do you think she'd been scavenging at that landfill?" TJ asked. "Months? A year?" Hard to know. Megan took me back to my pen, and I noticed that dogs with wheels did not go to the pen. They stayed with TJ. I wondered why. People who were not Megan and TJ came to my new home sometimes. I would lean up against the door of my pen to watch them. The people would walk along the rows of pens until they came to a particular one, and then they'd open up that pen. The dog inside would come out to greet them. Some of the dogs came shyly. Some came slowly. Some barreled out with tails wagging. There was always a lot of talking and barking and laughing, and I could tell that the dogs were getting happier by the minute. Once a dog had greeted people like that, it no longer barked in that sad and lonely way. That dog was happy. I could see it and hear it and smell it. The dog would leave with the people, and I could see happiness in the dog's wagging tail and his head held high. Even the quiet black dog who lived next to me got to greet someone that way. One day, a man and a woman came to the door of his pen. Their hair was white, just as the dog's muzzle was white. They seemed quiet too, but when the dog got up and shook himself and came sedately out of his pen to sniff their hands, his tail began to wag slowly. They petted him and they stroked him, and they started to smile too. His tail wagged faster. They all walked down the row of pens. Nobody walked fast, but everyone was happy. Greeting dogs made people happy. Greeting people made dogs happy. I could understand that a little. I always was happy when Megan brought me food in the bowls, but these new people did not bring any food with them at all, not that I could see. And the dogs seemed even happier to greet them than I was to greet Megan. It was a puzzle, especially since the dogs always left and never came back. Why would they want to leave this wonderful place, where there was food and water and a place to stay dry and warm during the rain? Why would they want to be with any people but Megan? I began to figure out the answer the day that Megan came to my pen and took me out into the yard. TJ was there, but the dogs with wheels were not. In fact, I was the only dog getting outside time. Some other people were talking with TJ, 2 women and 1 man. When they saw me, the man started talking very loudly. Wow! Wow! Amazing! Can you believe it, Catherine? Look at her. What's her name? Shelby? My ears perked up when I heard Shelby. Something nice usually happens next. A treat? But nothing particular happened this time. Maybe this man didn't know the rules. He just kept talking. You were right. She looks exactly like the dog on the cover of the book. I mean, it could be a picture of her. The woman standing close to him, who had light-colored hair and kind eyes, laughed a little too. You're right. What breed was that dog on the cover of the photo of A Dog's Way Home, Bruce? Did you remember? Did you ever find out? Part pit, part Rottweiler, part nobody knows, the man said. I figured out that his name was Bruce. What's Shelby's breed, do you know? TJ shrugged. Can't say for sure. Pit, we think. Megan says German Shepherd, too. Wouldn't be surprised if there's some Rottweiler in there, though. The man named Bruce crouched down and held out his hand to me. Hey, girl. Hey, Shelby. Come here. I hesitated and I looked up at Megan to check out whether this was okay. I was starting to believe that people were not as frightening as I'd once thought. And Bruce didn't have a stick. Still, he was new to me. It's okay, girl, Megan told me. Here, come with me. She walked over to Bruce and I sniffed his hand and he smelled very interesting, like other dogs and coffee and cream cheese. Megan sometimes smelled like cream cheese in the morning too. It was a smell that I liked very much. I licked Bruce's fingers. The 2 women came over to meet me and pet me as well. The one called Catherine said Shelby too, and she stroked my head. The second woman, her name was Teresa, watched closely, and then she put her hand out for me to sniff. She smelled of other dogs and of dust and wind and sweat and time spent outdoors. I sniffed harder. There was a flowery lotion on her skin too, and a whiff of something of sugar and cinnamon. Next, I checked out Teresa's boots. They smelled strongly of other dogs too, just not any I personally ever met. She was very, very interesting. Can she do it? What do you think? Bruce asked. Teresa as I sniffed the cuffs of her pants. He reached out to stroke my back while Teresa gently scratched behind my ears. She looks perfect, but she's never had any training, right? I had learned since meeting Megan that petting was excellent. But 3 new people petting me and talking over my head felt like a little too much, even if they did smell of cream cheese and cinnamon and other dogs. I retreated to Megan, who bent down to hug me and talk to me softly. I didn't understand her words, but I leaned into her, content. I knew that her voice was telling me everything would be all right. I believed her, but I wasn't sure exactly what was happening. What do you think's happening? Had these 3 people, Bruce, Cameron, and Teresa, come for me? Just as I'd seen people come for other dogs? I was happy to see them, but I was supposed to be very happy, right? Was I supposed to be wagging my tail and dancing with excitement? I looked up at Megan, wishing she could tell me. Teresa was studying me very carefully. I felt as if she had wanted me to do something, but I didn't know what. What do you think? Can she do it? Bruce asked again. Teresa put her hands in the pockets of her jacket and nodded. Look at her. She's nodding at me. And Megan. There's your answer. Right there. If Shelby can trust, if Shelby can love, then she can be trained. She put out her hand. Shelby come, she said. I knew that word, Shelby. It often had a treat connected to it. but I did not see a treat in Teresa's hand. I looked up at Megan for guidance. She smiled down at me. "It's okay, girl. Go on," she told me. She nodded at Teresa. I didn't always understand the words that people used, but I could tell that Megan wanted me to know something about Teresa. I thought I understood what it was she was telling me. That Teresa was a nice person, like Megan herself. That Teresa was someone I could trust. Some people are nice. Once I had not believed this, but I had learned. Not all people yell and wave sticks and try to hurt dogs. Some of them like dogs. Some even have treats in their pockets. Bruce and Catherine, and especially Teresa, were like that, I decided. They didn't have sticks, and they didn't yell. They didn't seem to have treats either, but maybe that would change. People had ways I did not understand of filling up their pockets with treats. It was probably the best part of being a human being person. Teresa still had her hand out. She was waiting patiently. I walked over to her and I sniffed at the hand. Then I sat down at her feet. Everybody seemed very happy about this. Megan clapped her hands. "That's a girl!" Bruce exclaimed. Teresa smiled down at me. "This is going to work," she said. "So Shelby, are you ready to be a movie star?" And that's the end of chapter 5.